So I'm a 27-year-old guy, and my wife, let's call her Sarah, who's 26, cheated on me with a friend of mine. We'll call him Jake, also 27. Here's some backstory. We met when I was 22 at a mutual friend's wedding. She was close with the bride, and I was friends with the groom. They sat us together, hoping we'd hit it off. When I first saw her, I was blown away by how beautiful she was. We started talking and realized we had a lot in common. We clicked instantly. We spent the evening talking, eating, and dancing. We even ended up kissing on the dance floor. Our friends, the bride and groom, saw us and were excited, asking if something was happening between us. We just shrugged it off and continued with our night. We didn't exchange numbers, but about a week later she texted me. Turns out the bride gave her my number. I, of course, said yes. And that's how our relationship started. It was great, with only minor arguments. I eventually proposed 2 years into dating, and we got married less than a year later. We'd been married for just over a year when everything fell apart. Just before our first anniversary, I noticed little things that irritated me. She became more guarded with her phone. Girls' nights became more frequent, and our sex life almost disappeared. I brought this up several times but was brushed off, with her saying I was letting my insecurities get to me. She acted like my feelings didn't matter, so I started becoming colder. I stopped giving her goodbye kisses when I left for work, and unless it was something important, we barely spoke. One night while she slept, I took her phone and laptop and skimmed through her texts, emails, and messenger apps, but found nothing. Remembering stories I'd read online, I checked her car. I found a second phone and knew immediately what was going on. I wanted solid evidence before confronting her, so I looked through the phone and found only one number. I read every message, connected the phone to my computer, printed out everything, and spent the night researching divorce lawyers. The next day, I spent hours in my home office reading lawyers' bios and found one I liked. I emailed him, but since it was a Saturday, he wasn't in the office. I wanted to know who the guy was, so I grabbed my phone, typed the number, and was about to call pretending to be from a service provider when Jake's contact popped up. It took me a minute to process, but when I did, I blew up. I was yelling and cursing in my office. My wife opened the door to check on me, but I told her to get out. She went to our room. I had never cursed at her or raised my voice before. All day, I stayed in my office, silently raging. I called a friend, the groom from the wedding, and told him I needed to go for a drink. He must have heard something in my voice because he asked if I was okay. I told him I wasn't and really needed a drink. I took all the printouts and left for the bar. I got there first and ordered 4 shots of Jack and a beer. I was on my last shot when my friend, let's call him Tom, arrived and asked what was going on. I told him straight out that Sarah was cheating. He gave me his sympathy, and then I told him it was with Jake. He got visibly irritated because he was the one who introduced me to Jake. He kept saying he was sorry over and over. Jake and I were never super close. We were friendly at get-togethers, but never hung out one-on-one. I asked Tom not to mention this to anyone as I had just found out and hadn't even spoken to Sarah or a lawyer yet. I asked him not to tell his wife and to say I was having work problems if she asked. He agreed. We drank and talked most of the night. Then I called an Uber and went home around 3 a.m. When I checked my phone, I had a bunch of missed calls and texts from Sarah asking where I was, when I'd be home, and if I was okay. When I got home, she was asleep on the couch. I just went up to our bedroom and slept. I woke up with her in the bed, so I got dressed and left the house. I picked up my car and went to my office, burying myself in work for the day. I got home around 10 p.m., and to my surprise, Sarah greeted me and said she had made dinner. She asked if I wanted her to heat it up, but I told her no and went to bed. She followed soon after, asking what was wrong with me. I told her to leave me alone because I wanted to sleep. She kept pestering me until I snapped and yelled, "Sarah, stop! I'm trying to sleep! Go away!" The next morning, I got an email from the lawyer asking to meet later in the day, and I confirmed. I got ready and went downstairs to leave. Sarah had made breakfast and wanted to talk. I made a small plate and sat down. She started saying I'd been acting different and that she wanted to know why. I told her work had been stressful and it would soon be over. I finished up and told her I had to go. I went to my office, counting down the minutes until I could meet the lawyer. When I left, I told my assistant I was going out to lunch with a client, Sarah sometimes called my work, and left. The meeting with the lawyer went well. I handed over all the evidence I had gathered, and the lawyer said, "I'm sorry for what's going on, but I'm happy you gathered all this information. We live in an at-fault state, so your wife has no claim on most of your money. I told him I hadn't even thought about that. I just wanted to divorce her as soon as possible. He asked to keep the evidence, but I preferred he just make copies, as I hadn't told Sarah I knew yet and didn't want to hear her excuses. He agreed, had his assistant make copies, and told me she'd be served with papers in about 2 weeks. I thanked him and left. I went home to confront Sarah, but she wasn't there. I called her, no answer. I texted her, "I don't care if you're with Jake right now. Get home, we need to talk." She called me not a minute later, asking what I was talking about. I just told her to get home now. She arrived about 15 minutes later, and I said, "Wow, look at that, 15 minutes? That's about the same distance between here and Jake's, isn't it?" She looked dumbfounded. I gave her a minute to gather herself, but she just stared at me. I asked, "Well, nothing to say?" She tried to deny it and gaslight me, but I let her continue. She worked herself up and started insulting me. I slammed my fist on the table to shut her up and pulled out the evidence. I showed her each printout one at a time. She started crying and tried to apologize, saying she loved me. I said, "What happened to that energy you had before? You were so adamant about degrading and insulting me just a minute ago." She tried to hug me and tell me how sorry she was, but I put my hand out and told her not to touch me. She said we could go to the bedroom and do whatever I wanted. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Sweetheart, I will never touch you again. Do you want to know who else has these photos and messages? My lawyer. I'm divorcing you. Now get a bag, gather your clothes, and get out of my house." That was 3 days ago, and I haven't heard from her. I'm sorry this is so long, and if there are any spelling errors. For those who've been where I am, what can I expect from here? Thank you for reading.